Hello everyone, this is going to be my very first video on this channel. I'm not expecting it to blow up or anything, but it's just sort of something I made for fun and to sort of get out there. Anyway, today I'm going to be making a little Allosaurus enclosure for one of my parks. This park is actually called Paleoworld. Essentially what it is like a sort of Jurassic Zoo, if that makes any sense. It's like, what if we had dinosaur zoos, basically, which I know, very original concept, but yeah, I still thought it'd be fun to make, having like realistic habitats that a zoo would have for these animals. This is just the Jurassic section, which is why this enclosure is for Allosaurus. I've got a whole like sort of joint Permian-Triassic segment, which I might do a separate showcase of, but it is finished more or less. And I've been working on this park for about 2 weeks. Just adding things. But anyway, back to the enclosure. It's a big enclosure for Allosaurus at the very start of my Jurassic Trails section of the park, because I figured, Allosaurus is the Jurassic dinosaur, so why not, well, Jurassic carnivore at least, so why not include it at the very start of this section? You can see I've got the Allosaurus statue placed in the enclosure there. That's for scale, because, quick little tip, the statues are roughly the same size as the actual dinosaurs, so they're great for scaling. This enclosure itself was inspired by a couple of different things. Off the top of my head, Caesar creates his Protoceratops habitat, and ZSH plays his Allosaurus habitat were two inspirations. I think I'll put up the thumbnails of them now. But yeah, those sort of like inspired me to make a big natural-ish enclosure that was different from a lot of the other ones I made. Even in this park, because in this park, I'll put up some pictures now, the enclosures that I made for the other species are kind of bare bones. Like, they have some enrichment and some rock work and, well, I mean, not much rock work, but still, it's really not much. So I figured it'd be nice if I made an enclosure that was, like, supernatural, that had, like, hills and like a natural sort of like water thing, like a little stream, I guess it is. Yeah, it's a stream, basically. I also thought that would be cool because Allosaurus were theorized to have lived like around river environments. So I feel like adding a stream is very cool, like a very cool thing I could have done. I think it really adds to the enclosure in the end, and it really complements everything else. Another thing I did with the enclosure is that I wanted to add a lot of individually placeable foliage as well, like a lot of ferns, because there were a lot of ferns in the Jurassic period. There still are today, actually, and I figured it'd be very nice if I just scattered them around the enclosure, especially around little rock formations, which I will be making later on like the hillier areas, although I feel like I might have gone a little overboard, but I am still very proud of how they look. As for how I actually felt about placing all of those ferns, it honestly felt really nice. Because in a lot of my habitats, like I mentioned before, I'm pretty sure, I didn't really put much individually placeable foliage. Sure, there was like the occasional tree or something, but I really didn't put much like underbrush, if that makes any sense. So adding the ferns was really nice. Here you'll see me actually starting work on those rock formations in these little areas that I don't want the dinosaurs to be climbing up, and around the waterfalls. I used a lot of like upscaled rough rocks. Like there's this one particular rock that I used a couple times that looks really nice. I used that to sort of like cover the hillier parts. I also wanted to line all of the actual flowing water with rocks. So I used a bunch of the smaller rocks, and I think it turned out very nice. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that this was all done on a PS5, so I was sort of stuck at like 30 FPS. Obviously, it's not the most optimal to build with, and you don't really notice that it was 30 FPS right now because it's sped up, or at the very least I don't while editing this. But for when I do like the cinematic sort of shots at the end, PC players, cover your eyes. Most of the footage for at least a minute more after this is just me placing rocks. So I'm probably going to end the voiceover for a little bit until we get to me placing the foliage, and then I'll talk about that a bit more. So, now we've gotten to the part where I just start spamming ferns all over the place. I used a bunch of the tree ferns and the king ferns, because I think those are the most sort of Jurassic-y looking ones. Like, when I look at these, they sort of scream Jurassic. And in a minute, you'll see what I mean when I said that I might have gone a little overboard, because there are so many ferns. There's so many, and I put them everywhere. I also added a couple of fallen trees, as you saw a second ago. I added those for no real reason other than I thought they'd look pretty cool. I also ended up adding a couple of little other rock formations in some other places in the enclosure, and you'll see that in a minute. But now I'm just going to go back to the montage. So, now I'm starting work on the little guest area. I decided to have a little garden right in front of the fence, and I'd separate it from the path with this low stone wall, which I think fits really well and looks super nice. For the actual garden, I started out by just putting down some of I think it's the taiga scrubland foliage brush or something like that. I started out by just putting a little bit of that down, and then I ended up clearing a little bit of it and going in and individually placing some thyme bushes, both the normal ones and the flowering ones, because I think those look super nice, and they do look very nice in the temperate environment. In a second, I'm also going to add some maps and signs and stuff, and I'm going to add one of these little carnivore signs, which, by the way, another quick tip, the closest size you can get them to the actual labeled ones, like this one, the herbivore sign, and I think also the Spinosaurus sign, the closest you can get them to the actual labeled signs with species on them is somewhere in between 0.7 and 0.6. And that's the enclosure finished. Looking at it, I think it's safe to say that this is probably my personal best enclosure ever. You can see some of the little juvenile Allosaurus running around. The natural areas are really, really nice. And here's the two adults sleeping. Then here's the little stream I made for them. Here's the male going to probably eat some lunch. And this is the view you would get from the guest area. To the 4 of you who are going to be watching this, let me know if you want to see more of this. And with that being said, that's everything. Goodbye.